you said that they could skip, if their charges brought, they could skip the board altogether and go directly to court, right?
Yes, sir. That's what the legislation says, is that they can opt out of an investigation and go directly to a court.
And so we all know how long court is, so they could continue to practice for years while they were under investigation.
Yes, sir.
No recourse at all.
Yes, sir. Through the whole court process, and then whatever appeals take place.
Right. It could be 20 years and nothing ever really happens. So we certainly, yes. But that was what I wanted to know. Thank you very much.
Yes,
okay. Representative Jakovich, sorry about that.
And actually,
been a good day.
What Dr. Lewis said was, with respect, it's incorrect. The bill doesn't say that you skip the administrative process. And by the way, no, you have to go through the process, and then you can appeal to a court. But you go through, this is our investigation without having the benefit of any records from the board. This is simply talking to physicians in the community in Louisiana. Catherine Daniel, Breaux Bridge. John Scott Seville, Opelousas. Dr. Wallace Reynolds, New Orleans. Dr. Miles Gott, Baton Rouge. William Ben Hart, New Orleans. Kevin McKinley, New Orleans. Dr. Herzog, Slidell. Dr. Whitecloud, New Orleans. Dr. Ramey, Baton Rouge. Dr. Kopleski, Simmsport. All of those are doctors that have been reported to have committed suicide in the midst or upon dealings with the medical board. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow legislators, if anyone comes up here and presents to you that there's not a problem, I think the diagnosis of that representation would be denial. Not only have multiple physicians taken their lives, but other doctors have had their careers ruined. And I understand that you all need to know that the certain investigator that we're not supposed to name, who they say is supposed to be replaced at some point, she's been here how long? 15 years? And she's famous outside of Louisiana, infamous. She's infamous in Louisiana, and it's taken her 20 years to get rid of her, to get rid of pink slip. Well, you know what? Who gave the pink slip to these physicians? Who went and apologized to their families? Chad Hargan was a doctor in Shreveport that was famous for getting into bed with his patients and holding them and praying for them when they were dying of terminal cancer. And he met with the investigator that we're not supposed to name on or about July 17, 2017. Less than 24 hours later, blows his brains out. For someone to come up to this table and pretend that we do not have a problem, you're in denial. I understand they don't want to tweak their policies, and I understand they don't want to hand their documents over to Daryl Prepera, and I do apologize to you all that we didn't have more physicians. This is the problem, Representative Miller. They're terrified to come in here because of 20 years of abusive and retaliatory practices that Representative Johnson, you would not condone 1 minute in your closing here today. Okay.
Hold on, folks. Hold on, Representative Johnson.
Okay. Well,
it's very disparaging.
Okay. Well, I'm
asking you with every bit of decency that I can muster, calm down.
Okay.
Because I will tell you what I won't mention the name of that individual, but urinating on an African American police officer. Okay? So let's not go there. Okay? And let's not talk about those things.
Representative Johnson.
Let's keep it to this bill.
Representative Johnson.
And to the conduct that's before here, and to the merits that are on these pieces of paper.
Okay, Representative Johnson.
Okay.
The doctors that have committed suicide, that's the reason that this passed out of the Senate unanimously, in large part. But that's not all.
Evidence, Senator, that doctors committed suicide.
This is our investigation. We have not been given the investigative files. It's not just the doctors that have committed suicide. And again, I don't think we need to be in denial. What about there's actually 11 African-American female employees in the accounting department at the medical board that were fired and discharged in or about the summer of 2015 all at one time. Gee, I wonder what they had access to in the accounting department. Was it the fact that the board, which gets millions of dollars from doctors that they shake down, was allowing computer equipment to individuals? But this is what we do know. One of the 11 employees, after other employees and witnesses heard her being berated and screamed at by the investigative agent that we're not supposed to name, she went home and committed suicide. So we've got dead doctors, we've got a dead employee of the board, and let Mr. Collada come up here and deny that a board employee committed suicide after being ranted and raved at by the board investigator that we're not supposed to name. But let's talk about dead patients. Dr. Stevens was told, you will have no patient contact. Terminate it now. He says, I've got a suicidal patient in a hotel. He was told, we don't care, you need to cut him loose. He said, well, can I talk to Cecilia Mouton? No, cease patient contact. And basically, he had to call the police to go in. He wasn't even allowed to make a transfer of medical care arrangements for that suicidal patient. What he could do is he called the police, and they responded to the suicidal patient. Now, who did that put in danger? It put the patient in danger, put the police in danger. What about other patients? Dr. Ninefork testified that when Dr. Stevens was ordered to quit treating his patients, he lost 2 of his patients. So that's at least 2 patients. Well, wait a minute. It goes further. Dr. Feldman says that Tanya James, and he named her, after the board members went to her and told her, you need to change physicians because we're going to take his license away, she ended up being treated by another doctor, and after his careful care and after she was transferred to a doctor not familiar with her case, she overdosed. She's now gone. So that's patients, doctors, and employee. Dr. Stevens was threatened with the loss of his license if he didn't immediately sign a consent decree. By the way, where is the board investigator who's at the crux in all of these, that hasn't bothered to come to the hearing? But we also know, while this board investigator was going after doctors, she was having an affair with the lawyer that was in the law firm that represented the doctors. Blatant conflict of interest. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, if the board is complaining about this, Mr. Stolye, who was representing...
That's a bald-faced lie.
Okay, well, have a seat, Stolye. Have a seat. Well, maybe we can go ahead and get to the written record on that.
Okay, let's kind of get settled down.
I would like to read you, this is a quote from Louisiana Voice on March 18, 2016. Quote, Mouton, while still employed in 2010 as an investigator who looked into complaints about doctors, married attorney Jack Stolye, who at the time represented physicians who were subjects of investigations and had disciplinary actions pending before the board. The board director Robert Marier said in a letter, he said, quote, a personal relationship between Dr. Mouton and Mr. Stolye began in October 2016. So the board admitted that they were having a relationship while he was representing doctors that were the subject of disciplinary proceedings and while Cecilia Mouton was prosecuting them. We feel like that's a conflict of interest. We get a doctor who brings Dr. Stevens, he said, this is confidential medical records. He was standing holding them outside in the hallway last week. If they're confidential, why do you bring them out of your office and present them to a potential witness? What was the purpose of that? To try to intimidate him out of testifying about what he knew? And then when Dr. Stevens said, can I please have a copy of my own records? He said no. So that's false testimony. And if they have nothing to hide, they should have allowed Mr. Prepare to go in and look at their investigative files. In his statement to me, and I'm not sure if it was on the record, he said he has not been given the first investigative file. If they're not ashamed of their proceedings,
Okay,
well,
President Richard. Go ahead.
I make a motion to move forward.
thank you.
We have a motion by Representative Richard to move forward with the bill, as you've heard, with amendments. Is there any opposition? All right, Representative Miller.
Make a substitute motion to involuntarily defer, and I'll tell you the reason why. You mentioned Dr. Sabille in Opelousas. I knew that guy's family, and I never once heard that it was anything to do with the medical board. So
Okay.
please, before you mention my district again, come talk to me.
Okay, sir.
Okay, we have a substitute motion to involuntarily defer. Is there any opposition? Without opposition, we'll involuntarily defer.